I stayed silent through another evening of their poorly hidden affair, watching them exchange knowing glances across our dining room table. My husband Michael smirked, touching her shoulder as he passed the wine. My house, my money. That paid for everything while I pretended to be a simple interior decorator. The crystal glass felt cool against my palm as I observed them in the warm glow of the chandelier I'd personally selected from an artisan in Venice. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. If only they knew those worksite inspections were actually me overseeing the construction of what they thought would be our forever home. I'd built my construction empire from scratch over the past decade, long before I met Michael, keeping my true success hidden behind carefully crafted shell companies and a modest facade. The company had been my first love, my redemption after watching my mother lose everything in a bitter divorce. Every nail, every beam, every perfectly placed stone in this mansion had passed under my expert eye, while they believed I was just choosing paint colors and throw pillows. "Sarah's really been helping me with the house project," Michael said, pouring more wine for my supposed best friend. "She has such an eye for design." Sarah smiled that guilty smile I'd grown to recognize, the one that barely masked her betrayal. Everything in this house, the imported marble, the custom woodwork, the hand-painted murals, all supervised by me while they thought I was just making minor design choices. The irony of their deception playing out in a house I had literally built from the ground up wasn't lost on me. Their affair had started 6 months ago, though they thought I was oblivious. Every time Sarah stopped by to discuss design choices, every urgent site visit Michael made to meet her, every late-night text they thought was deleted, all of it captured by the sophisticated security system I'd integrated into the house's very walls. The same walls that would soon witness their downfall. I took another sip of water, maintaining my practiced mask of naive trust, the same mask I'd worn when I first met Michael at a charity fundraiser. Back then, I'd already learned the hard way that success attracted the wrong kind of attention. 2 failed relationships with men who saw me as their ticket to luxury had taught me caution. So when I met Michael, I decided to experiment. I presented myself as a moderately successful interior decorator, driving a modest car and living in a small apartment. Michael had seemed different at first, supportive even. "Your business will grow," he'd said in those early days. "Just keep networking." But as soon as we married and he moved into what he thought was our jointly funded house, the mask began to slip. Success changed him, or rather, revealed him. The way he gradually took credit for our lifestyle, bragging to friends about providing such luxury for his wife, made me realize I'd made the right choice in keeping my true success hidden. What he didn't know was that every secret meeting, every overtime work session with Sarah, every suspicious text was being documented by the security system I'd had installed during construction. The cameras hidden in the custom light fixtures, the state-of-the-art microphones concealed in the architectural details, the GPS trackers in both their cars, all feeding information to my private security team. Now, watching them exchange another knowing look across my handcrafted Italian dining table, I felt a calm settle over me. Upstairs in my private office, behind a biometric locked door they didn't even know existed, sat folders of evidence, surveillance footage, text messages recovered from the house Wi-Fi system, photographs from my security team, and detailed logs of their encounters. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight I savored the calm before the storm. "I was thinking," Sarah said, setting down her wine glass on one of my hand-selected coasters. "We should look at some new landscaping ideas. For the back garden." Her eyes flickered to Michael, their secret code for another planned rendezvous. Little did they know, I'd already approved the complete reconstruction of that garden, scheduled to begin the day after tomorrow. right after their world imploded. Watched Michael's hand brush against hers as he reached for the breadbasket, a gesture they thought was subtle. In my mind, I could already see tomorrow's scene unfolding. The shock on their faces, the crumbling of their carefully constructed lies, the moment they realized just who had been watching their every move. As the evening drew to a close, I remembered my mother's words from years ago, spoken through tears after her own divorce. Success isn't about flaunting what you have. It's about knowing when to reveal your true strength. Tomorrow, they would learn the true meaning of those words. But tonight, I simply smiled and played my part, knowing it would be the last time I'd have to wear this mask. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows I'd specifically designed to catch the dawn light. I'd been awake for hours reviewing the final preparations on my laptop while Michael slept soundly, oblivious to what the day would bring. My security team had already confirmed their positions, one at Sarah's house, one tracking Michael's car, and two more monitoring all digital communications. I smiled, remembering Michael's confused expression last night when I'd suggested he take Sarah to breakfast to discuss the garden redesign. He jumped at the opportunity, of course, thinking he was being clever. The truth was, I needed them both out of the house while my team made the final preparations. "I might be late for dinner," Michael said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. The same mirror I'd watched him practice his lies in countless times before. "Big client meeting today." Another lie. I'd already seen his text to Sarah arranging their breakfast rendezvous at La Maison, their regular spot where they thought nobody would recognize them. "Take your time," I replied, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "I have some design consultations anyway." He kissed my cheek, the gesture hollow now, and headed out. Through the kitchen window, I watched him check his phone, probably texting Sarah that the coast was clear. The GPS tracker in his car blinked steadily on my phone screen as he drove away. As soon as his car turned the corner, my house transformed into a command center. Emma, my most trusted security coordinator, emerged from the hidden office adjacent to my private study. "Everything's in place," she reported, pulling up multiple screens showing surveillance feeds. "Sarah left her house 5 minutes ago. They'll arrive at La Maison within 10 minutes of each other, just like always." I nodded, pulling up the dossier we'd compiled over the past 6 months. The evidence was overwhelming. 147 coincidental meetings, 2,149 text messages, many explicitly detailing their affair, 216 hours of surveillance footage, and financial records showing the gifts they'd bought each other using what Michael thought was our joint account. Actually, just another way I'd monitored their deception. "The lawyers?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Emma had been coordinating with them for weeks. "Standing by. Divorce papers are ready, along with the restraining orders and financial freezes. One call and it all goes into motion." She paused, checking another screen. "Sarah's realtor has already listed her house, by the way. She's been planning to move in here once you're out of the picture." The thought almost made me laugh. The house they'd been plotting to share was about to become a monument to their downfall. Every luxury feature they'd admired, every design element they'd praised, would soon remind them of their own hubris. "The construction crew is ready?" I confirmed, pulling up the architectural plans for the house. "Yes. As soon as you give the word, they'll begin the complete renovation of the East Wing, including the master bedroom where they've been meeting." Emma's efficiency was one of the reasons I'd chosen her to coordinate this operation. "The noise will make the house unlivable for at least 3 months. Perfect timing. By then, the divorce would be finalized, and the house would be transformed, erasing every trace of their betrayal." I checked my watch. They would be sitting down to breakfast now, probably playing footsie under the table while plotting their future in my home. "Show me the La Maison feed," I instructed. The restaurant's security cameras, officially installed by my construction company during a recent renovation, gave us a perfect view of their table. There they sat, heads close together, Michael's hand resting on Sarah's arm. The directional microphones picked up their conversation clearly. "Just a few more weeks," Michael was saying, his voice low but distinct in my earpiece. "Once the garden project is done, we'll tell her. She'll be devastated, probably move back to her small apartment. Then we can finally be together here." Sarah giggled, the sound making my skin crawl. "The house is perfect for us. All those design suggestions I made, they were really about making it our home." I muted the feed, having heard enough. "Start the sequence," I instructed Emma. She nodded, fingers flying across her keyboard. Within seconds, their phones would begin receiving a carefully orchestrated series of notifications. First, their joint bank accounts would be frozen, accounts Michael thought he controlled but were actually under my company's oversight. Then, the photos would start arriving, surveillance shots of their meetings, screenshots of their messages, evidence of their planned deception. Finally, they'd receive the legal notices: divorce papers for Michael, harassment suits for Sarah, and restraining orders for both. "They've received the first notifications," Emma reported, watching their reactions through the restaurant cameras. I observed their faces drain of color as they frantically checked their phones. Michael was already trying to call his bank. Sarah's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the photos flooding her inbox. "Ready for phase 2? Emma asked, her finger hovering over the next command. I stood, smoothing my designer dress, one that cost more than Michael's monthly salary, though he'd never known. "Send in the servers." On screen, we watched as 2 waiters approached their table, handing them each a thick envelope. Inside were detailed documents showing exactly who owned their beloved dream house, along with proof of my actual net worth and control of the construction empire they'd unknowingly been living in. "They're leaving the restaurant," Emma noted. "Separately, GPS shows they're both heading here." "Perfect." I checked my reflection in the mirror, ensuring every detail was flawless. "Have security direct them to the main living room when they arrive. It's time they met the real owner of this house." The next hour would change everything, but for now, I savored these last moments of anticipation. After all, the best revenge isn't just about the reveal, it's about orchestrating every detail of the fall. I stood in my private study, watching through the security feeds as both cars pulled into the circular driveway within minutes of each other. Michael arrived first, practically jumping out of his BMW, the one he thought he'd bought with his own money. Sarah's Audi followed closely behind, her mascara noticeably smeared from what I assumed were panicked tears. "They're both approaching." "The front door," Emma reported from her command station. "Security has confirmed the protocol. All other entrances are locked, and their key fobs have been deactivated." I watched them meet at the front steps, their body language tense and defensive. Gone was the intimate comfort they'd shown at breakfast just an hour ago. The directional microphones picked up their hurried conversation. "What the hell is going on?" Sarah hissed, clutching her designer handbag, another gift Michael had bought her with my money. "How did they get those photos? Those messages?" "I don't know," Michael snapped back, repeatedly pressing his now useless key fob. "Nothing's working. The bank accounts are frozen and my lawyer isn't answering." "Your lawyer isn't answering," I spoke into my comm link, "because he's currently in a meeting with mine, reviewing evidence of your financial misconduct." Emma nodded, confirming that the meeting was indeed in progress. The security guard, one of my most trusted employees, approached them with practiced professionalism. "Mr. Morrison, Ms. Williams, please follow me to the main living room. You're expected." I watched their confusion grow as they were led through their own home like visitors. The living room had been prepared exactly as I'd specified. The large screen was ready to display our comprehensive surveillance presentation, and their usual seats had been replaced with less comfortable options. "Pull up the house cameras," I instructed Emma. Multiple views of the living room appeared on my screens. Michael and Sarah sat stiffly on opposite ends of the sofa, both frantically checking their phones. "Start the presentation." The large screen, In the living room flickered to life, displaying a timeline of their affair. Dates, locations, messages, and photographs began scrolling past. Their faces paled as they watched their secret meetings played back in high definition. "Security confirms you're clear to proceed," Emma reported. "All exits are monitored, and the legal team is standing by." I took one final look in the mirror, ensuring every detail was perfect. My power suit, a custom Chanel piece worth more than Sarah's car, projected exactly the image I wanted. Around my neck, I wore my mother's pearls, a reminder of why I'd learned to protect myself so carefully. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed through the house as I descended the main staircase. Through the security feed-in, my earpiece, I could hear their reactions to the approaching footsteps. "Maybe we can explain," Sarah was whispering frantically. "Tell her it's not what it looks like." Michael stood as I entered the room, his face a mask of practiced concern. "Honey, there's been some kind of mistake?" He stopped mid-sentence as he took in my appearance, so different from the modest facade I'd maintained for years. "Please, sit down," I said, my voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding billion-dollar construction projects. "We have a lot to discuss." Sarah started to stand, but my sharp glance froze her in place. I said, "Sit down, Sarah. Your days of making yourself at home in my house are over." "Your house?" Michael's attempt at a confident laugh fell flat. "What are you talking about? We bought this house together." "Did we?" I moved to the center of the room, deliberately positioning myself between them and the exit. "Let's talk about this house, shall we? About who really paid for it, designed it, and built it?" With a subtle hand gesture, I signaled Emma to send the next set of documents to their phones. The simultaneous ping of incoming messages made them both jump. "What you're receiving now is proof of ownership. Not just of this house, but of Morrison Construction Enterprises. Or should I say, Richardson Construction Empire?" I watched understanding slowly dawn on their faces. "That's my real name, by the way. Elizabeth Richardson, owner and CEO of the company that built this house, along with half the luxury developments in this city." "That's impossible," Sarah breathed, scrolling through the documents. "You're just a decorator." "Am I?" I smiled, remembering all the times they'd dismissed my simple suggestions about the house. "Tell me, Sarah, those garden designs you've been working on with Michael, did you really think I wouldn't recognize them as the ones I rejected from my own company 6 months ago?" Michael stood again, his face fluctuating between anger and fear. "This is some kind of trick. You're just an interior decorator. I've supported you, given you everything. Have you?" I cut him off, pulling up more documents on the main screen. "Let's talk about what you've actually given me, Michael. Or rather, what you've given Sarah using my money. The jewelry, the car, the secret apartment downtown. All paid for with funds from what you thought was our joint account." "I can explain," he started, but I held up my hand. "The time for explanations ended the moment you started planning to force me out of my own house." I turned to Sarah. "Did you really think you'd be living here? Planning my garden while sleeping in my bed?" Sarah's face crumpled. "He said, he told me." "He told you a lot of things, didn't he? Just like he told me a lot of things." I moved to the window, looking out over the grounds. "But here's what's actually going to happen. In the next hour, my security team will escort you both out. The locks have already been changed, and your access to all accounts has been permanently revoked." I turned back to face them, enjoying the way they seemed to shrink under my gaze. "Michael, you'll find divorce papers waiting at your office. Don't bother contesting them. The prenup you insisted on works very much in my favor. Sarah, there's a restraining order with your name on it. Break it, and you'll find yourself dealing with more than just a broken lease on your house." "You can't do this," Michael stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "I already have." I pressed a button on my phone, and the screen filled with footage of their breakfast meeting. While you were planning my removal from my own home, I was finalizing your removal from my life. Everything you thought you owned, every account you thought you controlled, every secret you thought you kept, it's all been documented, legally processed, and ready for public release if either of you chooses to fight this. The sound of footsteps announced the arrival of my security team. Please escort Mr. Morrison and Ms. Williams out, I instructed. And make sure they understand that their personal belongings will be delivered to their respective new addresses, after they've been thoroughly documented for evidence, of course. As they were led away, I heard Sarah's muffled sobs and Michael's angry protests fade down the hallway. Emma appeared at my side, tablet in hand. The lawyers confirm all papers have been served. The banks have processed the account transfers, and the press release is ready if needed. I nodded, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of the moment. Start the renovation crews tomorrow. I want every trace of them erased from this house. After all, the best revenge isn't just about the revelation. It's about ensuring they understand exactly what they lost and who they lost it to. The next 24 hours unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance of consequences. I watched through my security feeds as Michael spent the night at his office, desperately trying to salvage what he could of his career, while Sarah retreated to her mother's house in tears. Their comfortable worlds were crumbling, piece by carefully arranged piece. Michael's law firm is requesting a meeting, Emma reported, entering my study with her morning briefing. Apparently, they're not pleased to learn their senior partner was planning to deceive the owner of their biggest client. She paused, checking her tablet. They're especially concerned about the evidence of him using company resources to facilitate the affair. I smiled, remembering Michael's boasts about his prestigious position. Send them the full dossier. Let them decide if they want to keep a partner who's been documenting his indiscretions on company devices. The renovation crew had already begun, their work, the sound of demolition echoing through the east wing. Every room that held memories of their betrayal was being gutted and redesigned. The master bedroom, their primary meeting place, would become a state-of-the-art home office. The garden where they'd planned their future would be transformed into a modern sculpture garden. Sarah's real estate agency called, Emma continued. They're terminating her contract. Apparently, they have strict policies about agents who get involved with clients' spouses. She pulled up another screen. And the country club board is reviewing both their memberships after receiving anonymous evidence of their behavior on club property. Their carefully constructed social world was dissolving. The same people who had witnessed their not-so-subtle flirtations at charity events and dinner parties were now watching their downfall with equal interest. Their phones had been buzzing constantly with messages from friends and colleagues, each choosing sides in the aftermath of the revelation. What about the prenup challenge? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Michael's new lawyer reviewed it this morning and advised him against contesting, Emma reported with satisfaction. The infidelity clause is ironclad, and our evidence is overwhelming. He stands to lose his partnership if this goes public. Through my surveillance network, I watched Michael leave his office, his usual confident stride replaced by a defeated shuffle. His firm had given him a choice: resign quietly or face a very public termination. The man who had bragged about supporting me was now facing the prospect of unemployment. Sarah's house has been pulled from the market, Emma added. No realtor. We'll touch it after what happened. She's stuck with the mortgage, the one she took out planning to move in here. I turned to the window, watching the gardeners remove the roses Sarah had insisted on planting, her subtle way of marking her territory. Have the landscapers replace everything. I want no trace of her choices left. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. She'd seen the divorce announcement in the society pages and wanted to check on me. I smiled, thinking of her words years ago about protecting oneself. She'd be proud to know I'd not only protected myself, but had built an empire, strong enough to weather any storm. Michael's trying to access the house again, Emma reported, pulling up the security feed. He stood at the gates, arguing with the guards, his expensive suit wrinkled from sleeping in his office. He's demanding to collect his things. Remind him that his belongings will be delivered to his new address after they've been inventoried for the divorce proceedings. I watched him gesture angrily on the screen. And suggest that making a scene outside the home of the city's largest developer might not be in his professional best interest. The feed showed him retreating to his car, defeat evident in every movement. The BMW, which I'd already reported to the leasing company as being in breach of contract, would be repossessed by the end of the week. Every pillar of the life he'd thought he controlled was being systematically removed. Sarah's been calling mutual friends, Emma noted, checking the social media monitoring. No one's returning her calls. Apparently, betraying the owner of the city's most successful construction company isn't good for one's social calendar. I nodded, reviewing the latest designs for the house renovation. Make sure the contractors understand the timeline. I want the transformation complete before the charity gala next month. The same gala where Michael and Sarah had first begun their affair would now showcase my emergence as the power player I'd always been. After all, the best revenge isn't just about taking away what they valued. It's about rising from the ashes stronger and more magnificent than before. And as I watched the sun set over my transforming estate, I knew this was just the beginning of their lessons in consequence. A month had passed since the revelation, and the transformation was everywhere. The house hummed with the sound of renovation crews working to erase every trace of betrayal, while outside, the autumn leaves scattered across the newly redesigned garden. I stood in what used to be their favorite meeting spot, now reimagined, as a serene meditation space, and reviewed the morning's reports with Emma. Michael's firm made it official this morning, she said, pulling up the press release. They've announced his departure, citing personal reasons. The timing couldn't be better, right before bonus season. She paused, checking another notification. He's been quietly approaching other firms, but word has spread. No one wants to risk their relationship with Richardson Construction. I smiled, remembering how proud Michael had been of his senior partnership. Now he was discovering that his professional reputation, like everything else in his life, had been built on borrowed power. My power. His credit cards were declined again last night, Emma continued, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. At Bella Luna, the same restaurant where he used to take Sarah for their business meetings. The security footage showed him arguing with the maitre d', his face red with embarrassment, as other diners watched and whispered. The divorce proceedings were moving swiftly, thanks to the mountain of evidence we'd collected. Michael's attempts to contest the prenup had been shut down by his own lawyer, who'd advised him that further resistance would only lead to more public humiliation. Sarah's professional situation isn't any better, Emma reported, switching screens. 3 of her biggest clients have pulled their listings. Apparently, no one wants a real estate agent who gets involved with their clients' spouses. She pulled up social media monitoring. She's been trying to rebrand herself as a luxury lifestyle consultant, but her former social circle isn't exactly helping with referrals. Through my network of contacts, I'd learned that Sarah had been quietly reaching out to mutual friends, trying to tell her side of the story. But society had already chosen sides, and they'd chosen the side with the power to shape the city's skyline. The charity gala committee called again, Emma noted. They're hoping you'll still attend next week, despite everything. Of course they were. The gala had always been one of the city's premier social events, and now they knew who really held the purse strings. Confirm my attendance, I instructed, and make sure the renovation of the East Wing is completed before then. I plan to host the after-party. The same event where Michael and Sarah had begun their affair would now serve as my official debut as Elizabeth Richardson, CEO and power player. The security feed showed a delivery truck arriving at Michael's new apartment. a modest one-bedroom, in a building far from our social circle. His things? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The last of them, Emma confirmed. Everything cataloged and documented for the divorce proceedings. He tried to claim some of the artwork was his, but we have the receipts showing they were all purchased through your company accounts. I watched through the cameras as the movers unloaded boxes of designer suits and expensive watches. All the trappings of success he'd thought he'd earned. Now he was learning the difference between actual power and borrowed glamour. Sarah's mother called the office again, Emma continued. She's still trying to arrange a meeting, says Sarah is deeply remorseful and wants to apologize in person. I could imagine that scene, Sarah, tears perfectly staged, trying to salvage what she could of her reputation. Send them the usual response, I said, turning to watch the sunset through my newly installed floor-to-ceiling windows. Any communication can go through the lawyers. The same lawyers who were now handling the harassment suit I'd filed against her for her role in attempting to force me out of my own home. The renovation crews were making excellent progress. The master bedroom where they'd conducted their affair had been completely gutted, transformed into a modern home office that showcased my actual success. The garden where they'd planned their future was now a sophisticated entertainment space, ready for the high-powered business meetings I no longer needed to hide. Michael's been drinking heavily, Emma reported, pulling up footage from various bar surveillance cameras. Last night he was overheard telling anyone who would listen about how he had it all and lost it. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd never had it all. He'd just been borrowing my success, thinking it was his own. His BMW was repossessed this morning, she added. The leasing company was quite understanding when we showed them the documentation of payment sources. Another piece of his carefully constructed facade stripped away. Through my extensive network, I heard whispers of their desperate attempts to rebuild. Michael had been seen at lesser law firms, trying to trade on his former prestige. Sarah had started a blog about life transitions, though her follower count was dismally low. Their worlds had shrunk dramatically, while mine had expanded to its true size. The Architectural Digest photoshoot is confirmed for next month, Emma said, changing topics. They're very interested in featuring the renovation as part of their Modern Power Homes series. The same magazine that Sarah had once hoped would feature her dream home would now showcase my actual success. Moved to my private office, the one they'd never known existed, and reviewed the latest business proposals. Richardson Construction had seen a surge in high-profile contracts since the revelation. Apparently, my reputation for meticulous planning and attention to detail had only been enhanced by the way I'd handled the betrayal. One last thing, Emma said, checking her final notes. The Charity Foundation Board is meeting tomorrow. They're voting on new leadership, and several members have suggested your name for chairwoman. The same board that Sarah had desperately wanted to join, that Michael had promised to help her access. I smiled, thinking of how differently things had turned out from what they'd planned. They'd thought they were orchestrating my exit, but instead, they'd orchestrated their own downfall. And as I watched the sun set over my transformed estate, I knew that the best revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about emerging stronger, more powerful, and completely free from those who would try to diminish you. 6 months after the revelation, I stood in my completely transformed home, preparing to host the city's most exclusive charity gala. The house that Michael and Sarah had once plotted to claim as their love nest had become a showcase of my true power and success. Every room told a story of transformation, every detail a reminder of their hubris and my triumph. The final divorce. Papers were signed this morning, Emma reported, entering my study with her tablet. Michael didn't even contest the last amendments. His new lawyer advised him that challenging anything would only lead to more public embarrassment. She paused, pulling up security footage. He was seen leaving the courthouse in a rideshare. Quite a change from his usual luxury car service. The Man, who had once swaggered through high-powered law firms, was now working as a junior associate at a strip mall practice in the suburbs, handling minor real estate disputes. His fall from grace had been spectacular and complete. Sarah's latest attempt at reinvention isn't going well either, Emma continued, switching screens. Her luxury lifestyle consulting business has officially failed. Turns out, no one wants lifestyle advice from someone who tried to steal another woman's life. The security feeds showed Sarah leaving her mother's house, her third temporary residence since the revelation, in a modest sedan that had replaced her luxury SUV. Through my network of contacts, I'd heard that she'd been reduced to teaching basic interior design classes at the local community center. The same woman who had once critiqued my simple taste was now demonstrating how to upcycle secondhand furniture. The Architectural Digest feature has gone viral, Emma noted, showing me the online metrics. They're calling it The Power of Transformation, the story of a house that evolved from a site of betrayal to a symbol of feminine strength. The magazine's spread showcased every aspect of the renovation, from the meditation garden that replaced their trysting spot to the state-of-the-art home office that had once been their master bedroom. I moved to the window, watching the catering. Staff set up for tonight's gala in the newly landscaped gardens. Any signs of attempted contact? Michael drove by the gates yesterday, Emma reported, pulling up the security footage. He sat there for 20 minutes, just staring at the house. The cameras caught him crying. The man who had once planned to force me out of my own home could now only view it from a distance, like a fallen king examining his lost kingdom. And Sarah? Still trying to reach out through intermediaries. Her mother attempted to corner one of your board members at the grocery store, pleading Sarah's case. Emma's lips twitched. The board member reminded her that attempting to steal the CEO's husband and home wasn't exactly a strong basis for reconciliation. The social fallout had been comprehensive and devastating. Their former friends had chosen sides swiftly and decisively, aligning themselves with the woman who controlled half the city's major development projects rather than the disgraced lawyer and the home-wrecking real estate agent. The foundation board meeting went well, Emma added, changing topics. Your appointment as chairwoman is official. The domestic violence shelter project has been fast-tracked. It was fitting that my first major project would be creating safe spaces for women escaping toxic relationships. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. She was flying in for tonight's gala, proud to see her daughter finally claiming her full power in public. Her words from years ago echoed in my mind. Success isn't just about building wealth. It's about building yourself into someone who can never be diminished. Michael's been drinking again, Emma reported, checking the bar surveillance network. Last night he was telling anyone who would listen about how he used to be somebody in this town. The irony was delicious. He'd never been somebody on his own. His entire status had been borrowed from my success, though he hadn't known it at the time. Through the security feeds, I watched the final preparations for the gala. The same event where they had begun their affair a year ago would now serve as the ultimate showcase of their downfall and my ascension. Sarah tried to buy a ticket, Emma noted, almost as an afterthought. Through a friend of a friend, we've flagged all possible aliases and proxy purchases. The woman who had once expected to co-host these events was now desperately trying to gain entry as a guest. The video compilation is ready, Emma added, pulling up the presentation planned for tonight. Just subtle enough. Business achievements, charitable works, and a few choice clips that everyone will understand, but no one can criticize. Including footage of Michael and Sarah at last year's gala, their secret glances now obvious to anyone watching. I reviewed the guest list one final time. Every power player in the city would be here tonight, witnessing my official emergence as Elizabeth Richardson, CEO and philanthropist. The whispers about my failed marriage would be overshadowed by admiration for my business acumen and charitable works. One last thing, Emma said, checking her final notifications. Michael's former law firm has officially signed an exclusive contract with Richardson Construction. They've made it clear that his departure was crucial to maintaining the relationship. I smiled, remembering how proud Michael had been of bringing in that contract, never knowing he was negotiating with his own wife's company. Now his former colleagues were eagerly distancing themselves from him. Curry favor with the woman they'd discovered held the real power. As the sun set over my transformed estate, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had thought they were orchestrating my exit, planning to claim my life as their own. Instead, they had orchestrated their own downfall, while I had emerged stronger and more powerful than ever. After all, the best revenge isn't just about watching your enemies fall, it's about rising so high that they can never reach you again. And as I prepared to greet my guests, I knew that Michael and Sarah would spend the rest of their lives looking up at the life they'd tried to steal, forever reminded of the power they'd underestimated and the woman who had orchestrated their complete and total downfall. The charity gala proved to be more than just a social event. It was my coronation as the city's undisputed power player. As I descended the grand staircase in a custom Versace gown, I could feel the shift in the room. Gone were the whispers about my failed marriage. Instead, the air buzzed with admiration and a hint of fear. This was Elizabeth Richardson's true debut? "Everyone who matters is here," Emma murmured through my discreet earpiece. "The mayor, city council members, every major developer in the state." She paused, checking her tablet. "And the security team just turned away both Michael and Sarah. They tried to crash the event separately. Michael claimed he'd been invited by his old firm, and Sarah attempted to slip in with the catering staff." I smiled, greeting the mayor with practiced grace. The security footage would make an interesting addition to our collection. Two desperate people trying to glimpse their former lives through the gates they once thought they'd control. Sarah was seen crying in her car afterward, Emma continued, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Apparently, being turned away from the event she'd planned to host was the final humiliation. The woman who had once expected to rule this social circle couldn't even gain entry as a server. The evening unfolded like a perfectly choreographed performance. Every detail of the transformed house drew gasps of admiration. The meditation garden, lit with thousands of twinkling lights, bore no trace of their secret meetings. The home office, once their master bedroom, now showcased architectural awards and press coverage of Richardson Construction's latest projects. "Michael's been calling his old contacts all evening," Emma reported during a quiet moment. "No one's answering. They're all here, watching your video presentation about the domestic violence shelter project." The same colleagues who had once laughed at his jokes were now eagerly courting my favor. The presentation was a masterpiece of subtle revenge. Photos and videos showcased my business achievements, charitable works, and social influence, including, of course, carefully selected clips from last year's gala, moments that now clearly showed Michael and Sarah's indiscretion to anyone paying attention. "Did you see that woman speaking in the video?" I overheard one guest whisper to another. "Wasn't she the one who tried to steal Elizabeth's husband and house? Now she's teaching craft classes at the community center." The whispers spread through the crowd, each retelling making Sarah's fall from grace more dramatic. My mother joined me on the terrace, her eyes shining with pride. "You've surpassed everything I hoped for you," she said, squeezing my hand. "When I told you to protect yourself, I never imagined you'd build an empire." Through the security feeds, we could see Michael making one last attempt to enter the grounds. This time, he was visibly drunk, demanding to speak to his wife about their home. Security escorted him to a waiting rideshare vehicle, a far cry from the luxury cars he used to drive. His new firm called, Emma reported, checking her messages. "They're putting him on probation for unprofessional behavior. Apparently, showing up drunk at your ex-wife's charity event isn't good for a lawyer's reputation." Another piece of his already crumbling professional life falling away. Sarah's latest social media posts told their own story of desperation. Her attempt at a Fresh Start blog had devolved into thinly veiled references to lost love and betrayal. Her followers, mostly spam accounts and bots, offered no comfort. "The foundation board is impressed," Emma noted as the evening wound down. "The domestic violence shelter project has already received double the expected donations." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A woman who had faced betrayal in her own home was now creating safe spaces for others. As the last guest departed, I stood in my private study, watching the valet parking attendants handle a fleet of luxury vehicles. 1 year ago, I had stood in this same spot, listening to Michael and Sarah plan their future in my home. Now they couldn't even get past the front gate. "Final reports from the surveillance team," Emma said, entering with her tablet. "Michael ended up at a bar downtown telling anyone who would listen about his empire. The bartender finally cut him off when he couldn't pay his tab. The man who had once bragged about providing luxury was now begging strangers to buy him drinks." Sarah's evening had been equally pathetic. Security cameras showed her parked outside her old real estate office, watching her replacement show luxury properties to clients who used to be hers. Her mother's house lights were still on, waiting for another night of tears and regrets. "The Architectural Digest photographer sent over the final proofs," Emma added, pulling up the images. "They're calling it the Phoenix Estate, a story of rebirth and transformation. The same house that Sarah had planned to redecorate and Michael had thought to claim was now a symbol of my triumph." My phone buzzed with messages from board members and city officials, each eager to schedule meetings and discuss projects. The same people who had once dismissed me as Michael's wife were now competing for my attention. "One last thing," Emma said, checking her final report. "The divorce is officially recorded. Michael Morrison is no longer connected to you or any of your assets in any way." She paused, allowing herself a small smile. "Though he's still trying to use your former connection to get restaurant reservations." I moved to the window, watching the last cars leave my driveway. The garden lights illuminated the grounds, showing no trace of the betrayal that had once tainted this space. Like the phoenix rising from ashes, my home and my life had been transformed by the very fire that was meant to destroy them. "Schedule the next foundation board meeting for next week," I instructed Emma. "It's time to expand the shelter project to other cities." After all, the best revenge isn't just about personal triumph. It's about creating something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. As the night settled over my transformed estate, I thought about Michael and Sarah, each alone with their regrets, forever watching from the outside as I soared higher than they could ever reach. They had thought to claim my life as their own, never realizing they were just temporary characters in my story of transformation and triumph. 1 year after the gala that marked my true emergence as Elizabeth Richardson, I sat in my private study, reviewing the annual reports. The transformation had been complete and lasting, extending far beyond personal revenge into something more meaningful. The domestic violence shelter network had expanded to 3 states, offering safe havens for women rebuilding their lives. The very pain that Michael and Sarah had caused had become a foundation for helping others. "The final surveillance reports are in," Emma said, entering with her morning briefing. "Would you like to know what became of them?" Her tablet held the last chapter of their downfall, though they were now little more than a cautionary tale. In my success story, Michael had finally hit rock bottom. After losing his law license due to multiple instances of public intoxication and unprofessional behavior, he'd moved back to his hometown in Ohio. The man who once commanded boardrooms was now working as a paralegal at his cousin's small practice, handling routine paperwork for minor cases. "He tried to write a memoir," Emma noted, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Publishers rejected it as too bitter and self-serving. Apparently, his story of being the victim in his own betrayal didn't resonate with readers." The last photos, From our surveillance network showed him living in a modest apartment, driving a used car, all traces of his former luxury life erased. Sarah's decline had been equally dramatic. After multiple failed attempts to rebuild her real estate career in neighboring cities, she'd finally accepted reality. She now worked as a sales associate at a home decor chain store, helping middle-class homeowners select curtains and throw pillows. The woman who had once plotted to steal my mansion was now living in a rented 2-bedroom apartment, her designer wardrobe sold piece by piece on consignment. Her mother finally stopped defending her, Emma reported, scrolling through social media updates. The last straw was discovering Sarah had borrowed against her house to finance her lifestyle during the affair. Another relationship destroyed by their web of deception. Through my extensive network, I heard occasional whispers about them. Michael, drunk at his high school reunion, crying about the empire he'd lost. Sarah, trying to date wealthy men, but finding her reputation preceded her. They had become walking warnings about the dangers of betrayal and hubris. The Phoenix estate feature has been optioned for a documentary, Emma continued, changing topics. They're particularly interested in the shelter network that grew from it. My story of transformation had sparked a movement, inspiring other women to reclaim their power and rebuild their lives. I moved to the window, surveying my expanded estate. The property next door, the one Sarah had once suggested they buy for, their future, had been acquired and transformed into the foundation's headquarters. Every day, the people who had once enabled their affair now worked to support survivors of domestic betrayal. The Richardson Construction quarterly numbers are exceptional, Emma noted, pulling up the financial reports. The company's reputation for integrity has attracted major international clients. The same business acumen they had dismissed had built an empire they could now only observe from afar. My phone buzzed with a message from the foundation board. Another shelter was ready to open, this one in the same suburb where Sarah now lived. She would drive past it daily, a constant reminder of the life she'd tried to steal and the woman who had outmaneuvered her. Michael's former law firm has completely rebranded, Emma reported. They're now one of our biggest supporters, sponsoring 3 shelters. The same partners who had once laughed at his jokes about his simple wife now competed for my attention at charity events. Through the security feeds, I watched my transformed world operate smoothly. The meditation garden hosted weekly support groups for women rebuilding their lives. The home office, once their master bedroom, had become a command center for positive change. Every space they had tainted had been reclaimed and repurposed. Sarah tried to attend a foundation fundraiser last month, Emma added, pulling up the security footage. She claimed she wanted to make amends and contribute to the cause. The irony of her attempting to benefit from the very organization born from her betrayal was not lost on anyone. My mother's words rang truer than ever. Success isn't about revenge. It's about rising so high that your betrayers become footnotes in your story of triumph. Michael and Sarah had become exactly that. Cautionary tales in my biography, their betrayal merely the catalyst for something greater. The Lifestyle magazine wants to do a follow-up piece, Emma noted. From private pain to public purpose, focusing on how personal betrayal sparked a national movement. The same social circle that had witnessed their affair now celebrated my transformation from betrayed wife to empowered leader. I reviewed the latest architectural plans. The estate was expanding again, this time to include a conference center for women in business. The construction would be visible from the highway, a daily reminder to Michael during his commute to his modest job of the empire he'd lost through betrayal. One final note, Emma said, checking her last update. Michael and Sarah ran into each other at a local coffee shop last week. Our sources say it was intensely awkward. Neither could look the other in the eye. Their grand love affair had crumbled into mutual embarrassment and regret. As the sun set over my transformed estate, I reflected on the year's changes. Their betrayal had been meant to diminish me, to reduce me to a footnote in their love story. Instead, it had sparked a transformation that reached far beyond personal revenge. The pain they had caused had been transformed into purpose, their betrayal into a beacon of hope for others. After all, the best revenge isn't just about watching your betrayers fall. It's about building something so magnificent from their betrayal that they become irrelevant to your story. And as I reviewed the plans for the next phase of the foundation's expansion, I knew that Michael and Sarah would spend the rest of their lives watching from the shadows as their greatest mistake became my greatest triumph. 2 years to the day. After I revealed my true identity, I stood at the podium accepting the Humanitarian of the Year award. The grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel was packed with the same social circle that had once witnessed Michael and Sarah's affair. Now they watched as I was honored not just for my business success, but for transforming personal betrayal into a movement that had helped thousands of women reclaim their lives. "The contrast is quite poetic," Emma murmured through my earpiece as I prepared to give my speech. "Michael's watching this on a small TV in his studio apartment." Our surveillance network had evolved but never completely released its targets. We still kept tabs on their diminished lives, not out of vindictiveness but as a reminder of justice served. Michael's descent had continued steadily. After losing his paralegal position due to persistent alcoholism, he'd finally found work as a night clerk at a small-town law library. The man who once commanded million-dollar deals now spent his evenings organizing case files and helping law students find research materials. His dating profile, desperately seeking someone to help him rebuild, had gathered dust without a single response. Sarah's life took another interesting turn, Emma continued, checking her tablet. She was fired from the home decor store for trying to pass herself off as an interior design consultant to wealthy customers. Her attempt to recreate her former glory had backfired spectacularly. She now worked as a virtual assistant, managing social media accounts for small businesses, including, ironically, one of the shelters funded by my foundation. The foundation had exceeded all expectations, expanding to 5 states with plans for national coverage. Each new shelter opening made headlines, and each story invariably mentioned its origins, how a betrayed wife had turned her pain into purpose. Michael and Sarah's infidelity had unwittingly sparked a revolution in how society handled relationship, trauma, and betrayal. "Your mother's book about rebuilding after betrayal has hit the bestseller list," Emma noted as I concluded my acceptance speech. The memoir, which detailed her own divorce and my subsequent triumph, had struck a chord with readers nationwide. The chapter about Michael and Sarah's downfall was particularly popular. I moved through the crowd at the after-party, accepting congratulations and discussing future projects. The Phoenix Estate, as my home had become known, was now a symbol of transformation featured in architectural and lifestyle magazines worldwide. The same social circle that had once whispered about Michael and Sarah's affair now spoke in hushed tones about my ability to turn betrayal into triumph. "There's been another development," Emma reported as we moved to a quiet corner. "Michael tried to attend a law firm reunion last week. He was turned away at the door. Apparently, his former colleagues worried his presence would damage their relationship with Richardson Construction. The man who had once held court at such events couldn't even gain entry as a guest. Through our surveillance network, we'd captured the moment he'd stood outside the venue, watching his former peers arrive in luxury cars and designer suits. The contrast with his worn blazer and used Toyota was stark. He'd finally driven away, stopping at a bar where he spent the evening telling increasingly bitter stories about his deceitful ex-wife to uninterested strangers. Sarah's latest attempt at reinvention is interesting, Emma continued, scrolling through her updates. She's trying to start a YouTube channel about learning from life's mistakes. The irony was delicious. Her first video had garnered only 12 views, most from our monitoring team. The woman who had once plotted to steal my life couldn't even build a following discussing its loss. My phone buzzed with messages from international developers interested in replicating the foundation's model in their countries. The same business acumen Michael had dismissed was now attracting attention from global leaders in real estate and social development. The documentary about the Phoenix estate has won several awards, Emma noted, pulling up the entertainment news. Critics are calling it a masterclass in turning betrayal into triumph. The film had brought Michael and Sarah's downfall to an even wider audience, though they were portrayed as unnamed cautionary tales, footnotes in a larger story of transformation. Through the hotel's windows, I could see the city skyline dotted with Richardson construction projects. Each building stood as a testament to the success they had tried to steal, each charitable initiative a reminder of how their betrayal had been transformed into something meaningful. Michael's therapy blog is still active, Emma reported, though her tone suggested active was a generous description. His last post was about learning to accept a simpler life. The comments section remains empty. The man who had once mocked my supposed simple lifestyle was now forced to embrace the very existence he had derided. Sarah's social media told its own story of continued decline. Her attempts to date wealthy men in neighboring cities had consistently failed as her reputation followed her. The woman who had thought to claim my life as her own couldn't even maintain the appearance of success on Instagram. The foundation board has approved the international expansion, Emma added, returning to business matters. The first overseas shelter will open in London next month. What had begun as a response to personal betrayal had evolved into a global movement for empowerment and recovery. I moved to the hotel's terrace, overlooking the city I had helped shape. The Phoenix estate was visible in the distance, its lights a beacon of transformation. The meditation garden hosted weekly support groups, the conference center trained women in business leadership, and the foundation headquarters coordinated aid for betrayed women nationwide. One final note, Emma said, checking her last update. Michael and Sarah's paths crossed again at their high school reunion. Both left early, unable to face their former classmates' questions about their fall from grace. Their grand love affair, which had once threatened to destroy my life, had devolved into mutual embarrassment and shared regret. As the evening drew to a close, I reflected on how far we'd come from that dinner party where I'd watched them exchange knowing glances across my table. Their betrayal had been meant to reduce me to a footnote in their love story. Instead, they had become cautionary tales in my legacy of triumph. After all, the greatest revenge isn't just about watching your betrayers fall, or even about personal success. It's about creating something so magnificent from their betrayal that it transforms not just your life, but the lives of countless others. And as I watched the city lights twinkle below, I knew that Michael and Sarah would spend the rest of their lives watching from the shadows as their greatest mistake continued to fuel my greatest achievements.